morning, everybody. I hope it's sunny where you are, or at least trying to, the sun trying to break out. As Molly said, my name's Lisa Rudge. I'm from ADHD Foundation, and I'm going to be talking to you this morning about ADHD and burnout. My role within the foundation is Director of Parent Services, but I'm also a parent of neurodivergent children, albeit adult children. So I'm coming from a place of being a parent, being a professional, and part of my role, I'm also a counsellor as well. So the mental health side of things, I feel I've got that big holistic view. So that's a little bit about me, so you understand who I am and why I'm here, and the slant, I suppose, at which I'm coming at this. As a parent, my stance is always, let's see how we can put a strength-based slant on anything, whilst we try and understand our children and young people to be able to support them in the best way we can. So in this morning's presentation, we're going to look at burnout. We're going to look at what does it actually look like. We're going to look at why does it happen. And then we're going to look at how we can support our child or young person. Throughout the presentation, I will be using the term child. However, that's just for ease of not saying, oh, child and young person each single time, because the same applies on whether we're supporting our 6-year-old or our 16-year-old, or indeed supporting, our spouses, our friends, our family. So the same context, in adulthood as well. So what is burnout? I'm guessing we've all felt it at one time or another. So burnout is that state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. It's not the same as stress. Stress can be found, at a particular time. Something's happened, a stressor. It's the culmination of all of those that creates burnout. So if you think of each stress like adding to the pile, we say things like the straw that broke the camel's back and that type of thing. So burnout is when we've had those prolonged, ongoing stresses. And what we often find is that burnout, the physical and emotional and mental exhaustion, is also accompanied by things that we can absolutely see, things that are visible, things that other people can pick up on, such as decreased motivation, sense of ineffectiveness, negativity towards ourselves, towards our actions, our jobs, our school, our hobbies, and perhaps negative attitudes towards other people as well. So I suppose what I'm asking you to do is be a little bit of that sleuth. Look out for all of these cues and clues. So what we find is there's a stressor, something happens, and the culmination of that tips us over to anxiety, doesn't it? With the anxiety comes the exhaustion. Because we're exhausted, we're stressed. So we get into this vicious cycle of burnout, don't we? And it's really hard unless somebody is there to co-regulate with us. It's really hard to break this cycle. So what are we looking for? Physical signs might be things like fatigue. Fatigue, for those who don't know the term, fatigue is that body feeling of unable to have the energy to do anything. So fatigue, low energy, the increased muscle tension, or that draining feeling. I'm sure some of you are going, yep, I recognise this feeling. Increased sensory sensitivity. So if you've accessed any of our other webinars, you may well have been familiar with our senses. Our senses are what helps us understand our environment through sensory information coming from external, but also from the sensory information coming from internal as well. So increased sensory sensitivity might be, actually, the lights are too bright. They're bothering me. It could be this sound is just too overwhelming, I can't concentrate. It might be, oh, my clothes feel, really uncomfortable. I'm too hot, I'm too cold. I've got butterflies in my tummy, or so all of those sensory input, we might feel an increase in them. And some of this we'll be able to see as parents and carers in our children and young people. Physical signs would also encompass things like headaches, tummy aches, tense muscles. I wonder, as a parent, have you ever noticed your child perhaps having mysterious headaches or tummy aches? I feel sick. I can't go to school. I feel sick. Guessing we've all heard that at some point or another. And for sometimes, yes, it's a tummy bug, something that's going round. But sometimes actually it could be that burnout is causing internal feelings of perhaps those pains, even vomiting, even needing to go to the toilet. Physical signs of stress, anxiety, burnout could include things like diarrhea as well. So those digestive issues, we might be off our food, we might be eating more, and we might also have sleep issues. And sleep issues might be that we can't sleep. Sleep issues might be that we're just permanently wanting to sleep. We're just so exhausted and so tired. So these are some of the physical signs you might see. Cognitive signs, you might call them, brain signs, mental signs. We might perhaps be prone to emotional outbursts. So we might find that the emotional responses might seem disproportionate to what actually is happening. Those emotional outbursts might be upset, it might be fear, it might be anger, but it's that externalized outburst. Or we might see our children go numb, almost dissociate from us. They're not feeling anything. So rather than, on the one hand, those disproportionate, big emotional outbursts, or we might expect something and we're met with that numbness. We might notice that there's increased irritability or frustration from our child. That they've got a really, really short window of frustration, that everybody is getting on the nerves or everybody is getting at them, and I can't be bothered with that. That's doing me head in, or whatever term your child might use. We might see decreased motivation. So for things that they really, really like, their hobbies, their likes, their friendships, there might be, decreased motivation. Don't want to do it today. Can't be bothered. Don't want to go. We might see trouble concentrating. So lack of focus, forgetfulness. And this can be a challenge, this bit, to identify, because for lots of our children who might be neurodivergent, executive functioning challenges might already be there. But burnout will absolutely exacerbate any of those current challenges. And we might feel, we might be able to see in our children, young people, that feeling of disconnect, of isolation. Knowing that they should be going to see the friends or going to football practice or whatever that might be, but not wanting to, feeling isolated, but not being able to break that cycle. And then let's look at the behavioural signs. So these are more of what you might be able to notice and witness in them. So we might see that withdrawal from social activities or responsibilities. And thinking about responsibilities, that might be anything from, okay, it's their job to perhaps take the dog for a walk. It might be responsibilities in that you might say that they're no longer interested in clearing their room, putting their washing away. So things that, might be out of their, normal habits, their normal day-to-day activities. we might find that they fall into, functional language. And what I mean by that is you might all be able to relate when we're asking our children something and we're getting those one-word answers, very functional, no, yes, don't know, it's over there. Not giving us sentences, not giving us conversation, but answering us in the shortest possible way. It's not intentional. They're not meaning to, get on our nerves or be difficult. But the burnout means that actually that's all they're able to manage right now, just those functional responses. Even without the functional responses, we might see, I don't care, I can't do it, I'm no good. All of those types of negative self-talk coming out in phrases, we might see that. Negative, hostile, or oppositional behaviors. One thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking about this is siblings, how somebody in burnout might not be able to tolerate their sibling even breathing the same air as them, sitting next to them, because they'll cause a big behaviour response where they're hostile to their siblings or their peers. We might see a decline in personal hygiene and self-care. So, okay, we're not brushing our teeth. We're not getting showered every day. Our hair, like, oh, I can't be bothered, So we might be able to visibly see that decline in personal hygiene and self-care. We might be wearing the same clothes every single day, regardless of whether they're dirty and stinky. Loss of interest in hobbies or activities. So like I said before, even stuff that our children absolutely love at any other time of their life, during burnout, that interest may well be lost. So I'd said before about when I'm talking, it can be children, young people, adults. But historically, when we think about burnout, when we think about stress, when we think about all these types of big feelings, we often look from adult point of view. Okay, as adults, if we're trying to, I don't know, juggle the mortgage rate, if we're trying to juggle, two cars or one car, how do we, we need a tax, we need insurance, we need the MOT. Oh my goodness, the MOT is doing out. As an adult, we can relate to all of this. And when I'm talking to parents, quite often I hear, well, actually, they've got nothing to worry about. It's not like, they've got a job that they worry about. It's not like they're paying the bills. How can they be burnt out? Burnout happens right across the board. Even our little dinky little ones. It's not just for adults. So, the stressor, the events, the culmination of those events will be very different. However, the internal, the physical, emotional, and mental responses that we've just seen will be there right across the board. Okay, what causes it? Like I said before, there's lots of different demands placed upon us every single day. We might have sensory overload, and for our neurodivergent children and young people, well, it stands to reason that there may well already be sensory sensitivities there. But think about when we go about our daily lives, what's our environment like? Is it loud? Is it smelly? There's a lot of textures? Is there too much going on? So external things like that might be causing demands and expectations, so people pleasing, over promising, yeah, I can do that, I'll do that, I can get my homework done by 5 o'clock because I've promised that person that I can go out at 6 o'clock to play football. Demands placed upon the child from other people, but also from themselves, the demands that they place upon themselves. For some of our children, being still causes stress, anxiety, which can add into all those layers that culminate in that burnout. So think about our children who might have to sit still, in class, and how just difficult that might be for them to be able to conform to the expectations, and whether it's in a classroom setting, whether it's in the queue in Sainsbury's, whether it's in church, wherever that might be. For some children and adults, being still is incredibly stressful. Social exhaustion. How many of us have gone, do you know what? I've done enough peopling for today. I'm sure we've all got there. Our children are the same. Social interactions can be exhausting. Understanding social cues, maintaining or even instigating and maintaining conversations, ending conversations. How do you do that? For some of our children, young people, we're going to be seeing masking behaviours in social situations. How exhausting is that? School pressure. So think about school. We've got to manage our time. We've got to know what lessons we have, when we need to take our equipment, when we need our PE kit, how we navigate that, which part of the school do we go to with that? Who are our friends? Who are our support network in any given situation? Are we still a tight support network? Has that friendship broken? Well, when's my homework due? Oh my goodness, where do I need to focus on? On a day-to-day, on every single day for our children, young people, there's so many things that could be adding up and culminating in that burnout. Internal causes. So we've just mentioned masking there, and we were talking about the external, masking and what might that really, look like. Internally, when somebody masks or camouflages, that in itself is exhausting. There's a physical toll on that. Exhaustion anyway, if we're not sleeping, if we're not eating properly, if our muscles are tense and we're feeling sick and we can't concentrate, how just exhausting is that? To be able to regulate our emotions during this time is really, really hard. We're going to be trying, but it's going to be hard. Our sensory understanding, so not only the external senses on what we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, but those internal messages that are coming from us. Our vestibular system, do I feel steady? Where am I in relation to the world around me? Our proprioception, where am I in relation to myself? Do I feel grounded? Do I feel safe? Our interoception, what's our body telling us? What are our emotions? Are we, do I need the toilet? Am I full? Am I hungry? Am I hot? Am I cold? All of these can be extremely stressful. And transitions, even though the transitions might happen externally, the internal way that we need to meet those transitions, we need to manage our expectations of those transitions. We need to manage the change in our routine, those unexpected demands placed upon us. Hyperfocus. Here's another thing. So hyperfocus, yes, this is also internal. Hyperfocus is when we focus intensely on something. And for some of us, that can be really beneficial, but not in every area of our life. It can be incredibly exhausting. And for some of us, when that hyperfocus is there, we ignore everything else, neglect everything else, including self-care, including rest, and we're in the zone. That's in itself an exhausting. So hyperfocus can be productive, but can also drain everything that we have. I put a little quote at the bottom there. This is from Peanuts comic strip. There's no heavier burden than great potential. How many of us place lots of expectations on ourselves, of, oh, I need to do that. I need to do it to the best of my ability. I need to be perfect with that. I've got that great potential. How exhausting is that unsupported? Lack of healthy coping mechanisms. How many of us recognize in ourselves those unhealthy mechanisms that we use? I'm guessing you can all think of a couple. Unhealthy coping mechanisms might be overcommitment, perfectionism, masking, task avoidance, procrastination, food, think about overeating, I've said before, and even substance. For us as adults, we might go for a smoke or a vape. We might go for a drink. We might use recreational drugs. We might use sex. We might use, a wide range of things. What do our children use? Food, sugar. They may also be aware and have access to smoking and drugs and sex and things like that, age related. So lots of us fall into patterns that we think are coping mechanisms, but in actual fact, what they are doing is adding back into that negative cycle before. There's a question for you. Are ADHD brains more prone to burnout? I would argue yes. For lots of our ADHD brains, we're always on the go, always something happening, whether that's our thoughts, our impulses. That in itself is exhausting, regardless of anything else. Then think about the constant self-monitoring. I've got to sit still. I've got to tuck my shirt in. I've got to wear my tie. I've got to focus. I can't interrupt. Think about all this inner narrative. Okay, I've got to be like this. I've got to do that. How exhausting is that? On this type of theme as well, sit still, focus, don't interrupt. It's thought that by the age of 12, somebody with ADHD has been told 20,000 more negative comments than their peers. Sit still, be good, focus. How exhausting is that? How stressful is that? 20,000 by the age of 12. Emotional regulation challenges. So our ADHDers have big emotions. Big emotions take a big toll. Sensory, like I said before, there's a high proportion of our ADHDers or ND children in their entirety who do have sensory sensitivities in one way or another. So sensory overload can especially happen in school. Just for a minute, think what that school canteen is like. Oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine being there. Social settings, what's expected of me? What do we do? Masking. So we do know that ADHDers are very good at masking. However, we do know that the consequence of masking is that exhaustion, that burnout, perfectionism, and rejection sensitivity. Now, although these two aren't solely related to ADHD, a high proportion of those with ADHD will experience rejection sensitivity, that I'm not good enough feeling. Again, thinking about that burnout. There's the constant strain on our executive functioning. And if you've attended any of my webinars before, you may well be very familiar with this infographic on screen here, looking at the different elements of what executive functioning might look like. For those with ADHD, the ability to use all of these that we have on screen here may be delayed in its development up to about a third. So our children, young people, may not seem to be as emotionally mature as their peers, or be able to use their working memory as well as their peers. So there's that constant strain on executive functioning. What can we do? We can try and build as best a burnout busting environment as we can. Okay, what we do know is there's a cyclical nature of ADHD burnout. Intense focus or overcommit or whatever it is, crash. Recovery, repeat. Think about that infographic I showed you right at the very beginning. So we do know that is that cycle. And that gives us the clue that we need to be looking out for patterns. So if we can help our child recognize situations, what is problematic or stress inducing for them. So what times of the day, times of the week, times of the month, what tasks, is the particular settings that cause them overwhelm? Okay, helping them plan ahead, lean into their strengths to reduce any chances of burnout. So, okay, what have we got on board? What do we know your strengths are? Where do they lie? How can we lean into them? How can we make the most of them to perhaps take out the impact of some of the negatives? To do that, we might practice scenarios. So, what would happen in this situation? What would happen in that situation? We might even use the TV to be able to talk this through, sometimes externalizing it to a third person or a comic strip or as a social story. By externalizing it and not making it about our child can help them often have that more holistic 360 view. What would Steve McDonald from Coronation Street do there? What do you think is stressing out Bluey on the cartoon? So using those practice scenarios can help us develop responses and help us develop tools in our toolbox that we can practice in a safe environment. So then when we're in a situation where it's needed, our child has those tools at hand. We can reduce demand. So to be able to reduce demand on our child or young person, the first thing we need to do is co-regulation. If our children are dysregulated, we need to bring our calm to their dysregulation. And it's only once our children are calm that we can move forward with them. We might want to avoid or amend any emotionally provocative situations. So what I mean by that is, on the previous slide, I was saying about helping recognize situations that might add to overwhelm. Okay, let's see how we can do that. Okay, if overwhelm happens as we're getting ready of a morning for school, and it's because the TV's on, how do we avoid that? Well, actually, we have a no TV rule while getting ready for school. We can avoid and amend those situations without colluding with stress. So we're not giving in to the stress or saying, oh, you don't ever have to do anything that stresses you out. What we are doing is amending to avoid the big emotional response that's happening. If our child is experiencing burnout, limiting interaction might be helpful just whilst they recover. Okay, because otherwise we're going to set them right the way back. So when we limit those social interactions, we're not limiting necessarily the ones they want to do, but our expectations of them. Okay, so if we know our child's going through a period of burnout, we're not going to invite all of the family over for Sunday lunch that day, because that's going to add to our child's burnout, isn't it? If our child is extremely distressed, if there's any other option, we're not going to drag them around Sainsbury's with us, are we? So limiting that social interaction. If it's something that our child wants to do, however, that means they're coming back out of that burnout, and that's a good thing. Routine. So predictability helps to reduce anxiety. We know that. So that routine, so we know what to expect, gives our children a sense of safety and a sense of control. When we feel we don't have any control over our lives, that's when we feel stressed. So having some sense of control, okay, I know what's happening next. I know we're going to school, and I know after school is swimmer practice, or I know after school I can come home, kick my shoes off and watch a bit of TV or whatever that is. So if we have that routine, that lessens that sense of anxiety. If we can have decompression zones, and what do I mean by that? I mean a place where somebody can just go and relax, physically, emotionally, mentally, relax, to be able to build up our resources, our strength, our ability to engage in anything else. So we might have half an hour where our children can go to wherever they choose, whether it's in the garden or in the shed or in their bedroom, and there's no demands placed upon them during that time to decompress. How many of us do that as an adult? How many of us just think, I'm just going to take 5 minutes? Okay, I've driven home, I'm just going to sit in the car just for 5 minutes before we go in. We do this as adults, don't we? Let's offer our children the same opportunities. So I've already said that predictability and routine helps. However, we need to be mindful not to overload those schedules. Okay, we need to build in some downtime. You know, certainly with ADHD, what we as parents tend to do is, oh, we know they need to move. So, okay, they're going to school, they're going to football club, they're going to singing club, they're going to taekwondo, they're going to swimming, we're doing this, we're doing that. And often we overpack those schedules without any downtime, without any time to decompress, without any time for them to actually use their imagination, for them to feel like there's no expectation placed upon them. So it's important that we don't overload those schedules. Think about our battery. Okay, when we're seeing our children and young people becoming stressed, it's important that we can help co-regulate at the first opportunity, not when we're nearly empty. You know, with our phone, we majority of us wouldn't let our phone drain completely before we plug it in. You know, we preempt it, don't we? We know we're going to need it. We plug it in. Same goes for us. We need to build that in. For those of you, you know, I haven't put it into this particular presentation, but you may well have seen a previous presentation that I've done about burnout, when I've said about the spoons theory. Now, some of you will be familiar with the spoons theory. I personally love it. It was created by an American writer called Christine Miserando. I hope that's the right way of saying her name. And she said about this spoons theory, she created it to help other people understand that everything we do during our day takes some of our energy away. Okay, some of our physical energy, our mental energy, and our emotional energy. You know, and she, in the spoons theory, it's called the spoons theory because she had spoons. She was in a cafe while she was talking to her friend about this. And she used spoons as units of energy. Okay, like I said, the energy could be physical, mental, or emotional. We have a designated amount of spoons for our day. But actually, sometimes our activities take away a lot of our physical energy, or our mental energy, or our emotional energy. And we're running on empty. Okay, see that first picture there? We're running on fumes, as my kids say, you know, when their phone's gone, or we're running on fumes. Same with us. We can't let us get to that stage where we're running on fumes. To be able to recover from burnout, it's really important that we communicate. Okay, communication is absolute key. Communication doesn't necessarily mean talk at our young person. That's not what I'm saying. But as humans, we're social creatures. We need connection. Okay, so when somebody's experienced burnout, don't talk at them lots and lots and lots, because actually that may well be adding to overwhelm. We might want to reduce our language right down and give them an opportunity to come out. For those with ADHD, for them to hear an instruction or you know, anything like that, understand what it is we're saying, process it in a way in which they know what they're going to do with that information. Can take about 10 seconds for somebody with ADHD. For somebody with ADHD who's also feeling stressed and anxious and in a period of burnout, it can take up to 15 seconds. So when we're asking our children or placing demands upon them in any way, shape, or form, whether that demand is, come on, I need you to get your pajamas on now, it can take up to 15 seconds for them to be able to act upon that. It's important for us as parents and carers and loved ones not to go, oh, come on, I've just asked you, come on, hurry up. We're placing more demands there, aren't we? So think what I said about reducing that language back, giving our children, young people, time to process the information that they have at hand so they know what to do with that information. So we give space. We repeat if needed, given that space and time. And if we are repeating, again, keeping our language, reduced enough to give the information, but not with all the extra bits. If we do need to repeat, we need to use the same words, or as much as the same words as we can, to repeat that. Otherwise, that's going to land as a new instruction, a new demand. And they're going to need that 10 seconds again to process it. So repeat if needed. And then we can ask our child to feed that back so we know that they've understood what's needed. Okay, so what do you need to do? Let's see, what does that mean again? So if we're asking our child to feed back the next steps, we know that they've heard, understood, and processed it in a way that they can make a plan to move forward. We all make mistakes, don't we? Every single one of us make mistakes. And our children are no different. When our children do make mistakes, often they cycle into that, that infographic I showed you before, the stress, the anxiety, the exhaustion. Okay, so let's reframe mistakes as part of learning. Let's normalize them. We all make them. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're a failure. We haven't failed. We haven't done anything that can't be sorted and fixed and talked through. So let's reframe those mistakes, normalize them. They're part of learning. To help our child to advocate for what they need is important. So yes, we're co-regulating at the moment, but the point of co-regulating is to give them the tools to be able to regulate for themselves. That's self-regulation. So we need to encourage them to advocate for what they need. Ask for help. Let people know what helps in any given situation. So if we've got a tool at home that really works, let's help our child advocate for that when they're in other settings, to be able to say to their teacher, when I'm at home and this happens, I do this and it's really helpful. Can I try that in school? Choosing our battles. So often we will feel frustrated. We really will. I absolutely get that. I've been there. However, prioritizing connection over correction, as cheesy as that sounds, it's really, really important. Again, from the slide before, we are social creatures. We need that connection to feel safe. When we feel safe, our anxiety, that cortisol and adrenaline and all those stress hormones start to decrease. So if we prioritize that connection, partner with school. So in the same way as I said about that self-advocating before, we can do that for our children as well. So share what works at home with school, or vice versa. If school have something that works really well there, and we're experiencing burnout at home, okay, that two-way communication can help us manage that burnout, help us see where those emotionally provocative situations are and what we can do about them and what tools we can build in our toolbox. Our children are the most wonderful, amazing creations. They really are. Let them be their quirky selves. Let's not try and put them in a box. However, if we can let them be their wonderful, quirky, amazing selves with a toolbox of strategies that they can use in various situations, they're going to thrive, they're going to grow, and they're going to be amazing. So let's look at how we develop those healthy, day-to-day habits to avoid the burnout. Sleep's important. And as much as ADHDers often say, oh, sleep's boring, sleep is important. So it's really important that we have consistent sleep routines. I mentioned the word routine before, didn't I? Routine is important to ADHDers, without a doubt. Having a bedtime routine really helps to be able to calm the body, the mind, and the emotions. And if you think of our ADHDers who might have busy brains, think about all of these possibilities. Having a routine that will calm us down before bed is important. We need to sleep. Relaxation techniques, to have something in our toolbox at all times to help bring stress levels down. Stress isn't the thought or whatever. Stress is the stressor. It's the thing that's happened that gives us a hormonal absolute blast of adrenaline and cortisol. If we can have tools at our disposal, like relaxation, even if it's as simple as breathing exercises. When we breathe, when we calm our breathing down, we calm down the adrenaline and the cortisol in our bodies. It's a chemical reaction. And that's why deep breaths help us. Relaxation techniques might be grounding techniques. Okay, let's think of 5 things that we can see right now, 4 things that we can hear right now, 3 things that we could reach out and touch right now. What do they feel like? 2 things that I can smell right now, 1 thing that I can taste right now. Okay, that seems simplistic, doesn't it? However, when we're doing that grounding routine, we're bringing everything back into the here and now. We're bringing our focus to our senses, bringing everything back in. When that happens, think about that chemical reaction. Our cortisol and adrenaline reduce. We're more able to think clearly, to be able to focus and deal with those external stresses. So look about what relaxation techniques you can put in for your family. Movement is absolutely ace as building in as a strategy, okay? Not just something that we do to play. Movement is really, really important. We use the same part of our brain when we move as we do when we focus. Everybody needs to move. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to join the gym or everybody needs to join a football club or run for 5 miles. Anything at all that includes movement, even micro movements. We might do little finger games. We might have tactile tools. We might have a little kitchen disco. We might run up and down the stairs. In our office, we do star jumps. Any type of movement that we can build into our day will help us avoid burnout, but also recover from it if it does happen. Balanced diet is really important for everybody, so if we can make sure that we're eating regular meals, regular times, for our ADHD, eating at lunchtime may well go amiss, especially for our teenagers and our adults. So let's make sure we're having a breakfast and we're having a lunch and we're having an evening meal. Let's make sure that those meals are balanced. Let's make sure that when we are snacking, they're appropriate snacks in appropriate portion sizes at appropriate times. But the last one on that list, the connection, that is the most important bit. For us to be able to help our children and be there to co-regulate, we need that connection. That connection involves feelings of trust and safety. When our children feel safe, well, then they're able to function. Sometimes we will need extra support for our child or extra support for ourselves even. Burnout, if it's prolonged burnout that can cross over to depression or like a diagnosable anxiety disorder. And that's especially true with our teenagers. So what I was saying before about recognizing, it's really important that we can recognize changes in our children and young people. If something feels off, talk to someone. It's really important. If we notice something, let's go with our gut instinct. That somebody could be the school, the teacher, the Senko, the school nurse team. It could be our GP. If we have health visitors for any other reason, it could be the health visitor. It could be our paediatrician. If we're worried, if we're feeling burnout and exhaustion alongside our child, it's important that we reach out. Don't do it alone. It's okay to reach out to family. It's okay to reach out for friends. If we're offered support from family and friends, take it. There's, organisations such as parent care forums, where parents can absolutely come together to support each other. That might be by offering advice. That might just be having a safe place to be able to offload our worries and our concerns. You don't have to do it alone. Parenting a child with ADHD, like I said before, is absolutely amazing, but it can be exhausting. And we need to look after ourselves as well, because burnout does happen to parents and carers. We need to prioritise our own well-being. All of the tips I added in before, again, don't just apply to our children. Right at the very beginning of this, I'd said our children, our teenagers, and us as adults as well. The same principles apply. So please, please also look after your own well-being. There are support resources. There's lots available on our website at www.adhdfoundation.org.uk, and the Witherslack group are amazing, and there's lots available through them. Their website is also on screen there. CAMS can offer you support. Look on the local offer page of your local authority website, and they'll be able to tell you what's commissioned within your area, what you can access. Young Minds is really, really good for our children and people who might be experiencing, stress, anxiety, burnout. And as I said before, parent care forums are a brilliant source of information and support. Every area, you'll be able to find your local parent care forum on your local authority's website. Although they'll be signposted on there, they work independently of the local authority. So, they are impartial and they can give you lots of advice and support. That's all my slides. I hope you found it helpful, even if that helpful is just by consolidating the learning you already had. So I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Oh, that was brilliant. Thanks so much, Lisa. There's been loads of questions, as you can imagine. And it seems like in the chat, the presentation's really resonated with everyone. So thank you so much. So we'll try and get through as many as we can. We've got 10 minutes. So the first question is, how can we support a child in burnout when we are in it ourselves?
Okay, there's that saying, isn't it? You can't pour from an empty cup. Okay, so first thing is we need to recognize that in ourselves. We need to start putting healthy mechanisms in for ourselves to be able to have that support, to be able to regulate ourselves. Asking for help. Lots of us feel that we can't ask, or I shouldn't ask. What if I ask? What if they think this? But actually, it's really important that we do reach out. And whether we reach out to family or friends or parent care forums or anything at all, if we're reaching out, what we're doing is refilling our cup, isn't it? Can't pour from that empty cup. Look after yourself first and foremost.
Yeah.
If whilst we're looking after ourselves, we do recognise our children and young people are in burnout, we can enlist help of others to help support our child whilst we refill our own cup. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a brilliant answer. Thank you, Lisa. The next question is, do you think the symptoms of ADHD burnout also apply to people with children with autism too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Neurodivergence right across the board. If you're neurodivergent, you're more likely to have challenges around your emotional um, modulation, I suppose, which will leave you wide open to stress. So, yes, I've mentioned ADHD today just because this presentation was about ADHD, but absolutely, our autistic children, young people, even our dyslexic, dyspraxic, um, tic disorder children, young people, executive functioning challenges. If you remember the infographic I showed you on screen before, um, right across the neurodiversity spectrum, there's challenges around those elements, those executive functioning. So, yes, anybody who experiences executive functioning challenges will also be prone to added stress and anxiety and ultimately burnout. And then if you think, you might remember it said before about those external messages that are coming to us, 20,000 in that study by Attitude magazine for our ADHDers. But if there's those external pressures of you've got to fit in, you've got to do it this way, and you can't move, and you can't chat, and you can't do any of this while you're trying to conform, how stressful must that be? I can tell you from personal experience that there's situations that I feel incredibly stressful in, and I know I've got to behave in a certain way, in a certain manner, and conform with societal norms. And that stresses the life out of me. You might recall it said before about, how many of us go home and go, do you know what? I've done enough people in for today. I've done enough adulting for today. I need just to sit in me comfies and me pillow, just fort and decompress. Absolutely. So we will find that our ADHDers, our autistic children, those especially may well go, oh, peopling's done for today, time out.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. The next question is, what does coming out of burnout look like? I have a 15-year-old daughter who's probably masked for a long time and has been in burnout for a while now, possible ASD and SEMH, attending school half days and not much else, stays at home all the time, can't work out how/if we can make school easier for her.
Okay, so coming out of burnout might look like increased interest in anything at all. Because we're likely, when we're in burnout, we're likely to be, can't be bothered, not interested, don't care. So when we see our children or young people or adults, actually caring again, wanting to know, well, what was that? How does my hair look? Can I try that? What shall we have for tea tonight? Anything like that, anything that sort of signifies that there's an interest being piqued. As part of our co-regulation, we might try and introduce interests to bring them out. So, you're saying your daughter perhaps is half days in school. Well, let's look at, okay, the half a day where you're not in school. What should we do? How should we structure that? What might that look like? So what we're doing is we're introducing the concept of the structure of the school day back in a safe way that we can potentially harness. Think what I'd said before about harnessing those strengths. Okay, so if we can pique an interest and bring a structure, that transition to a full day in school might be that little bit easier. I hope that's helped.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you, Lisa. We've got time for a couple more questions. So the next one is, how do I support my ADHD child through year 11 and GCSEs? He struggles academically, but compares himself to his high achieving friends and then gives up and feels like a failure. I want him to survive mentally above all else, as we have already been through a long and difficult period of burnout with him when he developed glandular fever as a result.
Well, first of all, just let me acknowledge how tough that must be for your son and for you as a family. That must be hard. Um, what you know, obviously I've only got a little bit of information there, but you said he's already experienced burnout. But I also suspect that rejection sensitivity is coming in there as well. I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not good enough. So building his self-esteem and his self-confidence outside of any expectations could be really helpful. If we just put those expectations, beg your pardon, if we just build that confidence around school and exams, that may well feed back into the, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming. If we can build self-esteem and confidence in other areas of his life, that would support the rejection sensitivity and burnout he's feeling at the moment with his exams. I wouldn't want to be in year 11 if you paid me. Not at all. It's a tough year for anybody adding in these these challenges and experiences. It really is tough, and I don't want to I'm giving suggestions, but I don't want you to think that the suggestions are given lightly or taking anything away from the situation he's feeling, because I know it's really hard. But that positive knock-on effect, that positive self-confidence and positive self-esteem can have, is not to be underestimated. So if you can give him lots of opportunity for positive emotions, doing things he likes, doing things he's good at, doing things that bring him joy, fills his cup a little bit. The analogy that I used before about that, empty cup. If we can build up his cup or his battery or however, his spoons, however way you want to word it, if we can build up those feelings of self-worth, those feelings of self-confidence, he's more likely to be able to focus and concentrate and put energy into those exams. You think what I'd said before, burnout isn't just one thing, it's physical, mental, and emotional. Okay, so let's look at how we can support all elements of that to be able to give the tools and support needed to tackle big situations such as exams. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that was a really good answer, Lisa. I think we'll just try and squeeze one last question in. We've had quite a lot of questions regarding medication, so I'll just ask this one. Do you think that medication can play a role in recovery for burnout? My daughter is 13, in burnout for 18 months, spends all the time in a room and exhibits severe anxiety and OCD.
Okay, to answer that, first of all, disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I am not a prescribing clinician. I cannot give any advice around medication. So there's my bench line. However, what you've described there, you've said, OCD and potentially an anxiety disorder, that's not just burnout there. So under the care of a GP or a medical practitioner, yes, if somebody is experiencing an anxiety disorder, medication may well be an option that can, offer support and offer options. Yeah, it's offering options. However, that can only be under the guidance of an appropriate clinician. So, for our children and young people, that's likely to be a paediatrician or CAMS. So I would suggest that if you haven't already done so, have a referral over to CAMS, because if it is an anxiety disorder, we've gone past burnout, haven't we? So, another set of tools may well be needed. That might include medication, that might include things like CBT or other talking therapies.